Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. He's a psychologist, a professor, and the author of many a book, most recently Rise Above, Overcome a Victim Mindset, Empower Yourself, and Realize Your Full Potential. And in this conversation, we talk about the basis, the core of his philosophy and his work. Wonderful conversation, absolutely amazing, gentle-hearted man. You can find links to his work down there in the description, as well as links to support this channel. Without further ado, here is Scott Barry Kaufman. Are you connected at all with, or close or tight with John Vervaeke at all? Do you guys overlap in your circles? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I see him every now and then at some conference or something, and he's a very warm greeting to me, and he's been on my podcast. Yeah, I'm an admirer of his work. For sure. Yeah.
How would your work overlap with his?
Pretty substantially. I teach a course, The Science of Living Well, at Columbia, and it's all about meaning and self-actualization. The idea of a meaning crisis is very true. There's certainly there's some sort of crisis going on right now, and I think like every researcher is projecting their own research interest into it. Yeah. But for some, it's the sexual crisis. Kids aren't having enough sex. For some, for Jonathan Haidt, it's the coddling crisis. For Vervaeke, it's meaning crisis. So I think that we the mark of intelligence is being able to hold more than one thing at your head at the same time, and so I think it's valid to recognize that there's a lot of crises going on right now.
Yeah, to see all the crises all at once. That's your IQ test.
I think it's important to do that, and I wouldn't reduce it to a single crisis, but I do think that a lack of meaning is something that we're all struggling with, not just college students or young people. I think that middle-aged, folk, or what is my relevance in the world right now?
How does if somebody's searching for meaning and they're offered a victimhood narrative, what's the attraction of that? And does it kind of hijack some neurology, you think, or some sort of narrative substructure that we're particularly susceptible to, either in the West or just as human beings?
Well, I think you have to understand that for a lot of people who are suffering, holding on to a victim identity is what gives them their meaning in life. I think that your question, it was a trap. It's not either or. I mean, for them, that is their source of meaning. People find sources of meaning in the most fascinating of ways. Humans are so interesting. If that's what we really want is meaning, there are all sorts of things we'll do to convince ourselves that that's our greatest source of meaning. First, for a lot of people into violent extremism, it really gives them a source of meaning. It really gives them. I mean, there's been some good research on that, and for those with identifying with their victimhood, it gives them a support group. It gives them attention. Not necessarily in a bad way. I mean, I don't want to say like attention is though like that's their main motive is attention or narcissism, because I don't think that's always the case. I do think it is the case in some cases for sure. But with a lot of people who are hurting, having that as your identity can first of all, it gives you an identity. There are a lot of people who are craving for an identity. It's better to have an identity than not to have an identity from a stabilization of consciousness point of view. From a cybernetic perspective, if you want to get really nerdy. But I know you like to get nerdy, Benjamin. I know you do.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't mind that.
No.
But so there's a lot of things we do for stabilization of consciousness, and who am I honestly to take that away from some people? The vibe of my book, Rise Above, for anyone who reads it, I hope you see that as my friend Nick Gillespie put it, I combine the empathy of Carl Rogers with the cold logic of Albert Ellis, the blunt logic of Albert Ellis,
So You brought up a lot of things. Meaning, that's just kind of a term that we kind of understand. Identity, It's kind of a term we kind of all intuitively understand, but how would CogSci or your own research, your own work, like bolster what meaning is, what identity is, so we know what we're playing with or talking about?
Mm. My training is in cognitive science. Started off studying intelligence and IQ tests and giftedness. I was really interested in the gifted education community and helping those kids and helping kids in special ed, and that's how I started. And then I got really interested in the cognitive science of creativity. And then there was this after that when I was at Penn, there was this switch in my own identity to really I'm a humanistic psychologist. I wouldn't sometimes cheekily I say I'm a cognitive humanistic psychologist, which no one has that as their identity. But I'm like, wow, I'm a cognitive humanistic scientist, like why not invent things, right? But I would say, just to answer your question, I think it's important to understand the history of my own career, and to understand that I think what really helps us understand the victim identity and the importance of data, all that is the humanistic psychology perspective. I've not been as enraptured in the cognitive science perspective as I used to be. I go to cognitive science conferences. Well, I rarely do these days, but when I do go, I find the topics boring and completely divorced from anything that most normal humans care about in the world today and are suffering and struggling with. So, like the neurons in your visual cortex firing when you see lines that are different from each other. I mean, great, you're getting a grant to do that. That's wonderful research. Okay, it's increasing human knowledge, but to me, I find that boring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, what I gather, what you mean by humanistic is more embodied, more contextualizing culture and personality and interaction.
Yes, and really caring about what it means to live a vital life from the inside. What is it like to be a human? What is it like what are the factors that you can have in your life that make you feel fully alive and fully creatively actualized? Those were the major themes of the humanistic psychologists, and those have always been my themes. And when I tried to study them in the field of cognitive science, when I started off, I found I reached a dead end really quickly and was searching for a different perspective, something that could enrich our understanding of the human experience. And then I found the humanistic psychologists, Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, Raoul May,
Mm-hmm.
and the existential psychotherapists like Irvin Yalom. And then I felt like my whole perspective I was able to expand, and I didn't feel so blocked. I really did feel like I reached a dead end with the cognitive science methodologies in understanding
Mm-hmm.
those questions.
Mm-hmm. What's existential psychotherapy or therapy?
It's acknowledging that there are givens of human existence, and
Mm-hmm.
we all want to matter. At the end of the day, we all want to connect with others. We all want to feel like we're moving in the direction of our goals, and that we're the authors of our own lives. We all want to feel good about ourselves, as though we can take pride, some kind of healthy pride in our mastery. These are things we all want, but they're givens of existence. Each one of those has another side of what's the price of admission of being human, which is we all want to connect, but you're going to get heartache once you jump into that pool. If you really open your heart to love, I guarantee you at least once you're going to be heartbroken. Even if your partner passes away someday, I mean, everything ends. And so really, really confronting the realities of the givens of human existence, I think, are so important to a life well lived.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and a lot of people have not gotten the memo that you're not supposed to be happy all the time. That if you have a day where you're feeling down, it doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're a victim either.
Mm-hmm.
We have to really give the memo to people about the existential realities and how to confront and deal with them with bravery. I mean, that's a word that the existential philosophers as well as the psychologists talked about a lot is
Really?
courage. Courage, the word courage. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mm.
The Courage to Create is one of my favorite books of all time by Raoul May. And it's ensconced in a philosophy that I am trying to carry if I can be so courageous to even say that. I'm trying to carry the baton.
Mm-hmm. I've been running into this concept of sacrifice a lot in discussions specifically with Orthodox Christians that I just happen to be running into right now in my own investigations.
I'm obsessed with the religion right now. Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Yeah. No, I
something
love that you're saying
attractive
this.
about it.
Yeah.
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 And you're just making me think that we have all these different options. Well, I mean, probably a very limited number of options with regard to our narrative's frame. As if we are a protagonist somehow, that's what I take an identity enables one to be, like making sense with the sense of us being a central character, at least in our own life.
Hero's journey.
Yeah. So victimhood, you said it gives you a number of different factors, a number of different dimensions in which to inhabit and to experience and to make sense of. And I was just thinking when you were talking about bravery and like a deeper value set, sacrifice came up. And sacrifice, just like victimhood, there's justified victimhood and there's unjust victimhood. And there's unjust sacrifice, and there's just sacrifice. There's like the martyrhood complex or like inversions of sacrifice. But I'm wondering, like, what is the opposite character of the victim, or something distinct from that? The victor, the villain.
Well, I distinguish in my book between. Have you read my book, by the way?
No, I haven't had a chance.
Oh, no problem. No problem. That wasn't a shaming question. It was just I was curious to know what level of. Yeah. So, in the first chapter, I distinguish between a victim mindset and an empowerment mindset.
Okay.
So to me, I see it as the difference between having a certain mindset that the world is against you and that all your problems can be blamed on external factors, and you don't have any responsibility at all in creating a life that you want to live, versus an empowerment mindset that acknowledges the suffering and the pain of life and the things that have happened to you, and also you also recognize the resiliency that you have within yourself and your own ability to overcome. So that's what the distinction is in my book. But the religion thing is really interesting because there's a great book, one of my favorite books, called The Courage to Be by Paul Tillich, who Paul is I believe a Christian thinker. And he defines the courage to be as the courage to accept oneself as accepted in spite of being unacceptable. It's a really profound book. I think that helping humans have the courage to be and have self-belief despite knowing how imperfect we are as humans is a real humanistic mission that I believe in. And I think all these things are linked. I think that's in line with Christian doctrine. I would say it's also in line with dare I say Jewish doctrine. It's gosh forbid that we find common themes across multiple religions and try to unite ourselves as a species. It feels sometimes like we are committed to fighting holy wars that God would not even approve of, in my opinion.
Yeah. The supremacy of identity is a pitfall too.
Yeah.
In order to undertake the empowerment process, or the process of becoming an empowered human being, I think you lose out on a lot of growth, but you also run the risk of damage or trouble if you don't go through a process of humiliation or being humbled. Recognizing that imperfect nature, recognizing that you might not be acceptable.
Yeah.
Wondering what your thoughts are on that. You come across somebody who's the hubris. I used to say that empowerment without etiquette is a license to be an asshole, because I saw a lot of that empowerment talk without anchored to nothing but you go girl kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my book is about the ways that we hold ourselves back, and that's part one. And then part two is about the ways that we can have self-empowerment. You don't want to be self-empowered to dominate people in a way that causes harm. for sure. I would not extol the merits of that. But having self-empowerment, in my view, is linked to your ability to not be defined by the worst that's within you. I think there's a humbleness there and also a self-love component to it, or a self-compassion
Hmm.
element of it, which that word comes up repeatedly in my book,
Hmm.
where you, and acceptance, life acceptance as well as self-acceptance. Uh, all these things I think are have a net positive if you can do that compared to the victim mindset.
Hmm. What set you down on this path? Questions, concerns?
What set me down on this path, you said?
Yeah. Why, this is very, yeah, it's very close to kind of I think psychologists are basically modern secular priests in a way, at least pastors. Pastors probably the better, but some of them go a little bit in the direction of a priest with, all their terminologies and christening people with all these different, what do they call it when you tell somebody they have autism, diagnoses. Yeah.
I would consider it quite the honor if someone called me a rabbi.
Mm. Is that
I
from
view
your,
myself more as a rabbi, someone who seeks wisdom. But yeah, you can replace that with lots of other things as well, depending on your belief system, for sure.
Mhm.
Um, well, I in when I was very young, I was really treated as though I was retarded. I had a learning disability, which caused it very hard for me to hear things. And I was in special education since till ninth grade, and there was this moment where a teacher who had never seen me before looked at me afresh and said, "What are you still doing here?" And it really caused me to realize that, wow, what am I still doing here? And also, why have I allowed this to continue for so many years? And I took back my agency, realized no
Wow.
one's coming to save me, and took myself out of special ed and looked to see what I was capable of and realized that it was my responsibility to show the world that I was intelligent. If I didn't do it, no one else was going to do that for me.
Was there like
So
a misdiagnosis going on? People didn't
no,
weren't
no,
able to recognize your intelligence, or they just
I had
brushed it off.
central, no, I mean, I looked stupid from the outside. I had central auditory processing disorder when I was very young because I had a lot of ear infections.
Oh.
And so it took me an extra couple moments to process things in real time.
Okay.
So I look stupid, and
Hmm.
there are a lot of people who look stupid when they're young and end up doing some pretty incredible things. That was the topic of my first book on Gifted, Intelligence Redefined.
Hmm.
And so that this theme, I mean, if one to read were to, I don't wish this on my worst enemy, but if one were to read my entire canon of 11 books back to back immediately and try, they'd be like, wow, this is all pretty cohesive body of work. It's all saying the same thing in different perspectives, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. You
Yeah.
know, this one focuses on really the mindset that's important, but other books have focused on ability and creative thinking.
Hmm.
But a lot of it really is about embracing what's unique within yourself, finding that most alive, unique center of your being and owning it
Mm.
and being it and not letting the world define you. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. There's a phenomena, or I could just tell a story. Let's say you grow up in a sheltered Christian home, right?
Mm,
And it's like the 1980s. You've never heard the word "damn" before. It came on the TV, and so your parents like took the TV into the garage. You can't watch TV. You have no contact with the outside world. Maybe homeschooled. Like you're very removed. You don't even know what you're capable of. And
mm,
then you go out to college or whatever. You venture out, and I don't know. Somebody hands you a book on Nietzsche, and you just start reading Nietzsche,
mm,
and it just blows your mind open, and all of that all of that potential that had been stored up just comes at you afresh. And because you're 19, you're a little bit older, you're aware of the process of catching up. I'm wondering if you're in ninth grade, so what, 14, 13,
Yeah,
14, 15?
correct. I
And
was 14. Yeah.
then you make the decision that you're an intelligent being, or however you would frame it. But what was the feeling of going from somebody who was classified as stupid to somebody like owning your intelligence, like
It
needing
was
books?
absolutely exhilarating. I was like, I'm going to catch up. I had 9 grades. I had 9 grades to catch up. I wasn't college bound. I took a summer class. I remember how exciting it was to be in mainstream education. I took a summer class in history. I remember it vividly, and I remember a Asian female was talking to her friends about all of um, the 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 travel that the orchestra. She was a violinist in the school orchestra, and she was like, "Oh, we're going to like France next month or whatever." And overheard that conversation, and a surge of inspiration swelled within me. And right after that class, I went right into the orchestra room, and the orchestra conductor was sitting there, tuning a violin or something. And I said, "Hey, my name is Scott. And I want to sign up for the orchestra in the fall." And he said, "What do you play?" And I said, "Oh, I should have thought this through." I said, "I don't play anything yet, but my grandfather is Harry Gordetzer, and he was in the Philadelphia Orchestra as a cellist for 50 years, and he's going to teach me this summer." And the orchestra director said, "Sign up." And then after school, I went right to my grandparents' house, and I said, "Gramps, will you teach me how to play cello this summer? I want to join the orchestra in the fall." And he was so delighted to do that.
Wow.
But it was exhilarating. There's something so unbelievably exhilarating about being on the path to mastery and believing in yourself. And also there's an element of that Michael Jordan really inhabited by creating enemies to motivate himself. It's called the underdog motivation. I have a whole chapter of that in my new book.
Okay. One supposes that you should be judicious with who you decide to be your enemy, because that does define you, and at least in relief, right?
Yeah, but if a lot of people really are your enemy, it's good to prove them wrong. And by your enemy defined as they don't believe in you, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's an adversarial situation. So the best thing you can do is not to hurt them, but prove them wrong.
Yeah, yeah. What success is the best revenge.
There you go.
Unless you truly love your enemies, then you should probably try to fail as hard as you can. But that's just a joke.
That seems self-defeating.
What going from, I guess, like special needs, or however is the proper term to define that, to just head first into studying and mastery. Was it difficult for you to learn discipline, or did you already have like discipline embedded in you?
Everything falls into place when you feel like you suddenly have a purpose. You feel like I think this stuff is very domain specific. I think there are so many instances of people who have floundered around and been diagnosed with ADHD and who appear lazy and unmotivated. And then, there's too many stories like this to be discounted. And then they find their thing and everything changes. Suddenly they're the most disciplined person you've ever met. Suddenly they're getting ice baths at 5 a.m, and feel a reason to take care of their bodies, feel a reason to take care of themselves. So I think there's something really true there. There's something really profound how our whole organizational structure can change in a moment when we find something that is a superordinate goal that is self-organizing, and all of our other goals suddenly become in the service of that. It changes our whole goal structure system.
Do you have any specific advice or general advice about finding that thing, undergoing the process of finding the right work, the right goal?
It's a great question. It's a great question because there's a lot more written about these, Howard Gardner calls them the crystallizing experiences. There are these moments that people have in their life where they encounter a stimuli. Maybe for some, it's like Yo-Yo Ma and Jacqueline Dupre. It was hearing a cello when they were young and saying, "I like the sound of that."
Hmm.
Um, uh, but for others, it could be when they're adults. My first article ever that I wrote was was a feature story for Psychology Today called I wrote it in grad school called Confessions of a Late Bloomer, and I profiled multiple late bloomers, and they found their spark when they were much older. I remember profiling some guy who became an actor a professional actor on Broadway for the first time when he was much older, and he said, well, the competition is much less, I kind of just bypassed all that bullshit that, a lot of young people have to go through when they're trying
Yeah.
to make it in acting.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more written about that. I actually, something happens in my body, I've noticed experientially when interviewers constantly, I mean, it's nonstop, ask me how-to questions. And I am so interested in understanding the world, and I really think I'm a scientist. I'm not. I don't think I'm a scientist. I am a scientist, but I was gonna say at heart, but I also think I'm a poet at heart too. So, or
Hmm.
an artist at heart. So maybe you can have multiple hearts. But um, I it bothers me sometimes because you don't ask Brian Cox, the great physicist, the popularizer of physics, when he's talking about his love and passion for black holes. Interviewers don't say how do you create a black hole. I wish there was more wonder in this world,
Hmm.
um, and awe for. I wish we could be inspired by real life examples of people who have found their calling, and we try to seek it out ourselves. Um, there's something I just noticed. There's something in my body that happens with the how-to questions, and it
Like
doesn't feel aligned.
constrictive or
Yeah, totally. It doesn't feel aligned.
adversarial, maybe?
Not adversarial, but it doesn't feel aligned to what lights me up.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was maybe just
Well,
a
I
long-winded
could,
way of saying I don't know.
well, yeah, no. And what that opened up to me was wondering about the preconditions for discovering one's passion in life. Like,
Well, inspiration, the science of inspiration is a really fun research topic, and researchers have done before and after, like what are the traits that make an inspiration more likely, and what do you get when you're feeling inspired by something?
hmm,
And so that is pretty exciting research, and a big part of it is the trait open to experience.
mm-hmm,
The more people can cultivate that trait and not consider things immediately irrelevant to their lives, but what let me experience it and see if I like it. It's all about expanding your experiences until you find that spark.
hmm,
I can't tell you, what the spark is, and I can't tell
yeah,
you how to, I'm not going to give you the protocol. But I think really expanding the human experience and living in it and getting really in touch with yourself in a way where you have a lot of self connection
hmm,
and do that work. And that's a lot of meditative work, but being able to do that so that you're not so influenced by the shoulds of, people, society telling you, oh, you shouldn't desire such a thing, or you shouldn't do that because you can get paid a lot more doing this, or it's more socially acceptable to do this. But kind of being able to transcend all that to really get in touch with what are the seeds of your soul telling you.
hmm,
One of my favorite book is The Soul's Code by Hillman, the psychologist James Hillman. Are you familiar with that one?
no, the soul's
Oh
code.
man. Yeah. Man, I'm so glad that I can like talk about this stuff in 2025 because it seems like a lot of people have forgotten some of these classics, you know. So, glad I can bring this
What
stuff back.
what caused you to think of the soul's code?
Well, his argument is that we all have this thing that our soul's yearning for in this lifetime. And most
Hmm.
of us ignore it. Most of us fear it, are scared of it. And it is possible for our daimonic, and Roll May talks a lot about this, not our demons, but our daimonic. That's just defined as whatever is within us that has the power to overtake us as a whole person.
Hmm.
Our daimonic is our greatest source of creativity, and it's also our greatest source of self-destruction. It's both. And so many of us fear it, and we never become what we're fully capable of because we never confront it. We
Hmm.
never think about how to integrate it. So there you go.
Why?
Not very self-helpy of me to say that.
Well, why? What's up with this destructive nature? Why would we be created in the image of something that has that aspect to it?
Isn't that a good question? I'm not God, but to answer that question, but it's a good question. It's a good one to think through. It's a good one to think about because maybe we were each given a very powerful force that had the intent has the every intention of being actualized, and
Hmm.
that's the best that a creator can do, is implant that in you, and it's up to you to do with it what you can. But if it's not a very powerful force, it's not going to get your attention.
Hmm.
So if you're if it turns out we're all living in a simulation and it's a computer program, you know because it seems like there's some evidence that is the case if you
Oh,
look at the
really?
fundament. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you look at the underlying nature of reality, the fabric of the universe, it turns out that it is very much resembling quantum computing.
Hmm.
And
Well, why
there's
wouldn't it be
almost
the case that quantum computing is resembling it?
You're smart. You're smart. I like your questions, Benjamin. Uh,
Thank you, Professor.
um, well, because a lot of quantum computing principles were discovered independently of the fabric of the universe. So it's kind of an interesting coincidence.
Okay.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
wasn't, yeah, yeah.
If we are in a
No, I like your questions though. Yeah.
simulation, I mean, I don't. Maybe there's. It tickles my mind to creatively think, or to venture to think that if this is something like a simulation, then whatever the
Hmm.
creative, destructive daemon within the human being is purposed
Hmm.
to do is to expand that simulation, to test the simulation, something within the simulation that can break and build the simulation.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, this idea of the soul's code is very much tied up with the idea of fate. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not a good idea to try to run away from your fate. It has a funny way of catching up with you.
Hmm.
So, when you look at people who have accomplished really great things,
Yeah.
what's the first person experience there like? It's something I've been fascinated with my whole life. I've studied in greatness and written books. I wrote an edited book called The Complexity of Greatness. You
Oh.
find that for the large majority of these individuals, one, they know what they have to do from a very young age. They feel it in their body. They know what they have to do, and and there's such they it almost feels like they are on this earth for that one thing.
Hmm.
They almost maybe suck in everything else for that reason. You know,
Hmm.
maybe they have so many flaws in other areas just to refocus yourself on the one thing you were put on this earth to do. I think there's something to it. Um, I want to have the humility to say I don't have it all figured out,
Yeah.
but I think
Fate
there's something there. Yeah.
is a very. I've been watching religion kind of leach back into polite conversation or into conversation in general. And by religion, I just don't mean the dogmatic evangelical in the sense of people promulgating their own belief systems, but people being willing to pick up and turn over and reconsider these concepts and these ways of thinking that had gone out of fashion when I was growing up in the 90s. You know, I grew up Christian, but the secular world never wanted to talk about God. And now people are more willing to talk about God, and they have different containers into which they can put religion, like this is symbology, or this is like some sort of archetypal design. There's these psychological tools that bridge the gap between the secular bubble that we live in and the religious bubbles that preceded and will precede us. So you see these concepts like God and angels and demons, maybe coincidences pop up. But one thing that I haven't heard somebody bring up directly or specifically in such a frightening manner as you did just now is the concept of fate. That kind of, I got a little jolt of fear. And I know that has to do with me not really, me understanding like a metal detector, like, oh, that's something that I haven't been paying attention to lately.
I think that, no, I'm getting chills too, because I mean, this is about as deep a conversation a human could have with another human. And it's not every podcast I get a chance to go to this level, but I do think that in the work I've a podcast, I've done 11 years, and I talked to all sorts of interesting people. And one of my most interesting interviews was about whether or not reincarnation exists, like the science of reincarnation. And going down that rabbit hole and the science of looking at the real evidence, sticking just to the evidence, even if you just stick to the evidence, I'm saying not, and don't go past it. There seems to be something there about we're each given something to wrestle with in our life. That's our life's theme. And it's really interesting to think that through and really to confront that, not to run away. Like what if it turns out that's true? Well, I think that I'd rather treat that as though it's true and really get a lot of therapy and really confront it than run away from it. If that's our purpose, then you know what? I want to do it. I want to wrestle with it and not just wrestle with it, but the point of like each life is to reconcile it. And if we don't, perhaps we come back, in a different form, and try again in a different body. There's some evidence to suggest that's actually true. And I'm not going beyond the science right now in what I'm saying.
The way you framed it as wrestling is evocative of Jacob,
Jordan
and
Peterson.
The angel. Well, no, Israel.
Okay, I love that. No, I just thought you were saying because Jordan Peterson's new book is he who wrestles with God or whatever it's called.
I'm sure he's drawing on the
Good point. Yeah, no, good point.
But my question then, like, why evoke therapy? Like, what's the parameters of that? Why would I? It's kind of a
good point.
Kind of a meme right now for men to be bagging on therapy, right? It's like, why would I need therapy? Or women saying you should go to therapy. It's like, why would I talk about my problems? Yeah. So what does that mean? Like, what even is therapy for a person who's well-adjusted, who wants for nothing but knows there's something more? What would therapy give that person?
I don't think therapy is the only route, but it's a route. It's a possible route. There are a lot of people who don't have many outlets in their life to process out loud with someone else who cares about what they're processing. And I want to honor that, man. Like, I want to have some empathy here. There's so much talk about like, oh, the woke, the anti-woke and all that. I want to transcend all that bullshit, because it's like there are some concepts that the woke talk about that are absolutely true, and there's some batshit crazy stuff too mixed in. But, and on the other side, the anti-woke. So anyway, one thing, this is all a lot to say that some people do have certain privileges. You know, that's my way of prefacing saying the word privilege
Oh,
without
okay.
saying, don't
Okay.
identify me as woke just because I said that, you know. You know, I think it's unfortunate we live in a world where you say one word and then people just, you
Yeah.
know, they
My
just,
favorite one is problematic. I love saying
yeah,
that.
well,
Just
that you won't hear me say.
oh, really? Okay,
'Cause,
so that's your trigger word, huh?
yeah, I don't like labeling a human as problematic. I think that's a
Hmm.
way of shutting down a debate and discussion.
Okay.
But the idea of privilege, I think, doesn't make sense. You know, we all have our privileges. We all have, you know,
Hmm.
you know, I think for some people, maybe they are more privileged in the sense that they can confront their demons, process their demons, or their demonic. Maybe we should stick with the demonic, not go to the
Hmm.
demons level, but process it through their support, their community, through religion, through their friends, through meditation practice, through you know, gurus, support groups. Um, Maybe they're
Hmm.
very high intelligence and they're able to devour books on the topic and help them. But I do think that therapy can be a nice, you know, there are good therapists, there are terrible therapists, you know, but a
Yeah.
good a good therapist creates this space of unconditional positive regard that Carl Rogers talked about a lot.
Hmm.
And I think that for a lot of people, that's a beneficial thing to be able to enter that space.
Yeah. That's such a problematic. I've seen the impact of therapeutic culture on our culture in its terminologies and in this sense, this misdirected sense of unconditional positive regard, as you say, where anything goes, where we can't judge anybody for anything, and distinguishing the confessional, whether it's a therapist or a priest or a rabbi's, you know, discussion space, den or whatever, and you know the street. It's important, and people projecting their, and that's one of the things where the woke-ishness kind of gets out of control, where we want to have a therapeutic space where people can embrace and accept each other and understand that some people are privileged, some people are other privileged and stuff. But what that does is it turns into a big mess because society isn't ordered that way, and those shoulds that we should ignore, we can't. Right, the shoulds that are blocking our way to achieve our fate were set up there largely for good reasons. There are shoulds in the world. You know, it's better to go this direction than that direction, even if you have to follow your heart in another direction. That should be there. But to cultivate the proper amount of to cultivate. Was it a space of positive regard, you say, or an attitude of positive
Yeah,
regard?
I was on Jordan Peterson's podcast, and he really started yelling. He started yelling at me when I used the phrase "unconditional positive regard." He's like, "I hate that
Unconditional.
phrase." Yeah,
Oh,
he hates
okay.
that. And
Okay.
so we had a
Well, I
whole
didn't mean to
discussion about
evoke
this.
Peterson.
No, it's okay, but we had a whole discussion about it because
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify what Carl Rogers meant by it. He just meant, yeah, so yeah, Jordan was getting hung up on the positive, you know, part. He's like, sometimes we need to condemn people for things, you know. And
Yeah.
okay, fair enough. But well, no, not fair enough. I mean, as a therapist, it's not your job to condemn someone.
Okay.
That's not your role. But giving people the space where they feel as though their actual felt experiences are valid. No, that's a great thing. That's a really great thing. Carl
Hmm.
Rogers found that that really opens up, you know, for people who are aggressive, it lowers their aggression.
Yeah.
It just has a net positive on the psyche.
Yeah. Reminds me of I've told this story before on my show, but maybe your audience will tune in, and so they won't be tired of me saying it. But I spent many years working in preschool for some reason as an adult, young adult male, and
Very cool.
I learned a lot. You know, those who know do, those who don't teach. So I had to
Hmm.
learn how to be a human by teaching people how to be, you know, humans. One thing that I noticed was that when a child was in distress, like scraped their knee or something like that, and got a shock of pain, responded to the pain, was embodying the pain, responding purely to the pain, becoming that pain. That if I watched intuitively the women that I worked with, because I was the only male there, would rush to it and coddle the child and soothe their pain and connect with their pain. And I didn't have the desire, the prompt to do that. I would just sit next to them and observe them and connect with the person on the other side of the pain. And once I did that, then the pain became something that was distinct from themselves, and then they could
like that.
Deal with it. Yeah. So it wasn't like I wasn't being positive for the pain or positive
Correct.
for the aggression. I was being positive for the human being that was experiencing that.
That's all Carl Rogers means. Because, and I like, internal family systems theory, just the idea of the fact there are different parts. We have different parts that want different things.
Yeah.
And that's part of the human experience. And if you can non-judgmentally confront some parts of yourselves that you have traditionally hated, but you can do it with a tenderness, you can then have greater freedom to figure out what to do with it. Does that make sense, Benjamin?
No. Yeah, I think, and what I wanted to add about the tirade that I went on against unconditional positive regard.
Yeah.
It takes a certain stature to embody that. Like, you have to be a rabbi, you have to be an elder in a way. You have to be somebody of a certain maturity to be able to provide that to other people. You have to have presence even. I don't know what the quality
active
is.
Listening. Yeah, Carl Rogers called it active listening. Yeah.
So you, in your youth, you engaged with art, with the cello, and that I assume that went on to other just intellectual pursuits.
Things. Yeah, which I've completely abandoned, and I have nightmares. I have
really?
dreams. They show up in my dreams constantly. No. My heart yearns to pick up the cello again, and yet I can't find an apartment in New York City that's big enough that will fit a cello, and so it really I feel my soul withering because of that.
It's like you have so many lives inside of you.
I do. I was an opera singer. I loved musical theater, and I never sing anymore. And I feel like that's still inside me. It's true. Yeah.
That's kind of a curse to follow one's self-actualization, but through the contingencies of time, to be aware of all this possibility and to feel those parts being cut off because time doesn't allow you to grow in every direction.
Correct. And then you have to make choices.
Yeah.
And that's part of taking responsibility for your existence. I mean, that's really what Role May talks a lot about is taking responsibility for your destiny.
What part of your soul, or if you prefer your heart, led you to choosing to be in your word, a rabbi, or to getting close to that role in the world? Teacher.
Well,
counselor.
People get mad at me sometimes on my social media that I don't take a side. And I just don't see my role. That's not what my soul is about. So if I had to, if I really, I do a lot of meditation, I really do. And I try to get in touch with who am I really. And I try to be that way, and who I am really is like I think everyone plays a role, and getting in touch with what is your role is important part of the journey. My role is this transcendence. I wrote a book called Transcend, so I'm on brand there, but it's to show people that you don't have to make choices that cause pain in one direction in the service of another direction. You can make choices that at least try to raise the tide for everyone. And I'm a big believer in that. And so I think there's something rabbi-ish about that. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, my first thought was a cheeky remark that, people get mad at you for not taking sides. Well, they get mad at me for taking sides. So
Oh
we're
yeah,
all
well
in
you
the
can't
same
win.
boat.
You can't win. You can't win no matter what you do. That's why you have to just choose yourself.
Yeah.
Because no matter what you choose, there's going to be people who don't like it.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah.
Trust me.
That's a part of the choice.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with you taking sides. And I've seen your Twitter feed, and I get a sense of some things that your leanings, but
Yeah.
I don't see anything. See, I look at that non-judgmentally. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, cool. No, I'm very interested in what people care about. Like that interests me. I'm interested in what Benjamin, cares about and what Benjamin thinks is important. And just like I am with all my students, I teach the Science of Living Well class,
Huh.
and a big part of that is helping students self-actualize and supporting them on their own journey. I believe that every individual is on a sacred self-actualization journey,
Hmm.
and I'm not my role is not to tear that down.
Hmm. I had a dream. People would ask me if I'm Christian, and whenever I get
Hmm.
into conversations about Christianity, I reach the limit of my knowledge. I'm like, I don't know. I've never met Jesus, so I don't know if he's God, the Son of God. So I don't want to claim that. I can't claim that until, I have indication of who this person called Jesus is, this
Hmm.
Christ figure. And I was blessed a couple months ago. I was in a dream, and I saw Jesus across the street, and I think I was in Israel, and there was some woman with me, and Jesus was across the street, and this Palestinian had this suitcase with wheels on it, and I knew there was a bomb in there. And the Palestinian had to reach down and tie his shoes or something, and then he was going off, and Jesus said, "Oh, you forgot your suitcase." And the Palestinian's like, "Oh, okay, thank you," and he walks off to the border, and Jesus comes across the street to us, and he was this really unassuming guy. He looked totally just like a normal dude, and the woman next to me got really offended. It's like that man was going to kill people, and you just enabled that. And Jesus looked right at me and said, "I don't take sides.
Hmm.
I love all of you, you know."
Hmm.
And the way he said that was, it wasn't like this beatific vision of Christ, but this depth of humanity that was much broader.
Hmm.
And what you've been talking to me about today, about acceptance and that
Hmm.
presence, and what you're kind of sending me is very close to what I was given to
Yeah.
understand about that role, that
Well, yeah,
personage.
I get a lot of comments that my work is in line with Christian theology. I mean, I
Hmm.
get that. I get, um, but yeah, that example you said is it's just a really interesting one because, if I knew there was a bomb in that suitcase, I would not want that to go through, because I also recognize the potential for destruction among humans, and I'm not blind to that. Um, it doesn't mean I hold both things in my mind at the same time. My belief in the greater potential of humans that I want to point people toward,
Hmm.
and also recognizing the potential for destruction that humans have. I think both are true.
That brings me back to what we were talking about, just the mystery of our destructive nature.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on understanding that? I mean, I asked it before as some sort of metaphysical question. Why are we created in the image of something that could be destructive? But I'm just wondering that coming into contact with one's creativity happens at the same time that one comes into contact with their destruction. And it's most graphically manifest in the puberty of a boy, of a male human being. When their libido comes online, so too does a great potential for self-destruction and for violence.
As well as that's when you get a lot of great potential to dominate on the soccer field.
Mm-hmm. And creatively,
no.
poetry comes into being. Your whole being comes online.
The daimonic. You're going back to the daimonic idea. It really can be channeled in all sorts of ways. That's destructive or really constructive. Sorry, what was the question though? Because you're right, the observation is correct, but what's the question?
Well, I guess you mentioned, I wanted to get into practice. You mentioned meditation. I'm wondering what, in your reading or your experience, what helps us with that part of ourself, or what signal is it sending when we find ourselves destroying more than we're creating?
I think there's something to the idea that whatever wolf we feed is the one that's stronger. There's something kind of true with that. Meditation allows you to try to break that cycle, allows you to be aware of what you're feeding, and have a greater consciousness and intentionality about what you want to be feeding on such a regular basis. I mean, there's so many interesting things. I think, the going through puberty, it has different effects on young boys and young girls, and that's an important thing to talk about as well. Testosterone has very specific effects, which I don't think. Well, right now there's kind of an assault on it, right, amongst feminists, and masculinity is considered toxic, but it's still, that doesn't make it go away. That doesn't, just saying that doesn't mean that we can overcome all these years of human evolution that has caused.
The net effect of that phrase has just been to leech male energy away from the places that label male energy toxic. So
nailed it. That was so well put. So I just try to take like a bird's eye view of this stuff and argue that, as I do, I have a framework in my book Transcend where I say nothing is bad in and of itself. Everything has, to adopt Abraham Maslow's framing, everything has a B flavor to it and a D flavor to it. That includes aggression, that includes love. Everything has a deprivation version of it where you're trying to get the need fulfilled from a place of deprivation. And everything has a flavor of it that is being oriented, or growth. You could say growth oriented. And I don't think anything's exempt to that. So I really do try to take a very, 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 very bird's eye view of all this stuff, and I don't label things. I mean, there's so many things in the name of, love and all the stuff we associate with the femininity, right? That has caused great destruction, too, right? We don't want to start going down a pathway of who's better, who's worse. I don't like when we start going down that pathway.
Well, the young people right now who are who are parting ways politically, the male and the female are being sent way adrift from each other. So there's plenty of rhetoric on either side.
I agree.
In order for the human race to go forward, they have to figure out how to get along. And so the framework of harmony or complementarity or whatever.
Like harmony. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that idea of harmony. Or even like acceptance too, of one's nature. It's a big one. That's a big one.
Well, yeah, acceptance and dare I say even attraction to the nature of the other, and understanding, I guess not understanding the mystery, but holding space for the mystery of the female sex or the male sex. At least honoring that.
Definitely. definitely.
perhaps.
Yeah, no,
You
that's a
brought
great
it.
point. Do you cover these issues? Sorry, go on, go on.
No, you can ask a question for once.
I don't want you to forget what you were going to say, though.
No, I have it. I have it written down. I drew a little picture.
Oh, nice. That looks like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
That's the
Do you
question. So it's right there.
uh do you cover issues of like sexuality on your podcast at all?
I have an extensive series of interviews on sexuality, principally around transition, but transition is just the gateway to understanding what this mystery is and why people are trying to solve it in that way or in other ways, which led me to speaking with detransitioners, which led me to speaking to feminists, which led me to speaking to psychologists, sexologists, and then meninists or masculinists. They don't quite have a solid name because they're, men out there in the tribal forests doing their own thing.
Cool. Well, I have to catch up. I have to binge watch Benjamin Boyce.
Binge watch me. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is
Maslow. Yeah.
Maslow.
Yeah, Maslow.
Okay, I was probably talking about some sort of Yiddish wine just now, but it's shown as a pyramid, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And is there
Yeah.
a pyramid in the top of the pyramid? Like, does it ever?
There is no pyramid. There is no pyramid.
Okay, so that's just
Maslow never drew a pyramid.
Okay. That's just like
Yeah.
something from the FDA that just leached into my mind about eating enough grains and not too much meat.
No. A lot of textbooks depict it as Maslow's theory of human motivation as a pyramid. You're absolutely right. It's Maslow's pyramid of needs is everywhere in representation, but Maslow himself hated it. Maslow himself. That's why in my book Transcend, I cut the damn pyramid and say it's more like life is like a sailboat. Yeah. Huh. The journey of self-actualization is more like traveling in this vast unknown of the sea toward the port that you want to sail to. I mean, they traced it. Some researchers traced that back to the early management psychology textbooks in the 60s with the self-realized man at the top of a stepladder, with a flagpole, and then and then it morphed into a pyramid. But I think we need to not think of that as a pyramid because life, the developmental process is always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's not like you are hungry and then you eat and are satiated and then you're never hungry again. That's not how life works.
Yeah.
We have to constantly choose growth and overcome our fear response, and it's a continual process of life. Yeah.
Scott Barry Kaufman, thank you so much for your time. I hope we can do this again because
Me too.
You allowed us to go to some really wonderful, tender places. Where can people find you, and what are they going to find when they get there?
Thanks. Yeah. Do you go by Benjamin or Ben?
I like Benjamin, but I feel familiar enough with you. You can call me Ben.
Honestly, whatever you prefer. Okay, thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. You can go to scottbarrykaufman.com and I kind of have everything there. Yeah. This has been a real delight chatting with you, and it's a real treat when I can talk to someone who isn't afraid of discussing existential issues because I love it. Yeah.
That's my bread and butter, at least spiritually.
I love it. Well, stay in touch, brother.
Absolutely. You have a good day.
You too.